knowing all about the Seattle music scene is Nelson Del Pino. Hi, Nelson.
Hey, Alex. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. Is it rainy there in Seattle today?
I haven't even looked out the window, probably.
How far is Tacoma from Seattle?
Oh, it's about 20 miles.
Oh, okay. So
20,
you must go
on the
to
freeway. It's not bad.
You must go to Seattle then quite often, right? And cruise by the Space Needle.
Oh yeah. Well, I've been up there a few times. Yeah.
Okay, so you teach music. There are all kinds of instruments, like you play guitar, piano. You know music theory, and you also you understand the recording studio process. Tell us a little bit about your experience and all that.
Well, I'm a voice trainer, and I started out teaching voice, and that's still what I do. But the problems musicians often have is they can sing, they can play an instrument, but they can't sing and play at the same time.
Yeah. So you help people coordinate that then.
Yeah, and so sometimes the problem isn't with their voice, is they don't know there's certain techniques in the way they're holding their instrument that makes it difficult to breathe or to sing.
Let me tell you a story about me, since you brought that up. Well, I've been playing guitar since I was about 14, but I started out left-handed, like Paul McCartney and Jimi Hendrix. But the teacher, my original teacher, let me do that because he saw I had the guitar upside down. Now, a few years later, a high school teacher told me, no, you better learn right-handed. So he made me restring it normally. And you know what? For 20 years, my right hand had no power in it. I didn't know how to play right-handed. It's awkward. I couldn't sing and play. In fact, if I tried to play and sing at the same time, it would mess me up either way, either on vocal or guitar. Had you have been my teacher as a kid back then, what would you have told me?
Oh, I probably wouldn't have changed the way you played the guitar. It's just that where amount of pressure you place on the strings, if you really bring out the tone in your instrument, things like that, because people who kind of play guitar, they tend to sing kind of twangy, kind of like the way they hear the guitar, and people who play piano, they kind of sing kind of throaty, kind of like the way the piano sounds, and so... Right. But if you really learn to play your instrument well, you realize that your instrument has a tone that's more than just twangy sounding or throaty sounding. It has its own sound. And so you learn technique and how to bring out the best sound out of your guitar and your whatever your instrument may be.
And you yourself understand the crossroads of art and science as what music's all about?
Yes, certainly. It's a bit of both.
And what do you lean in either direction, or are you more of a balance of those things?
Oh, I try to achieve balance, but I realize that people have different different things they favor, and so I try to work with, if a person's more scientific in the way they are, then I try to relate to that side of their personality. If they're more creative and they're not comfortable with technique, then I try to find through their expression how they could improve.
So in Seattle, you've actually been part of the recording process, and you've helped bands and you've produced bands and artists?
Yes. I interned from a producer here and had a lot of help from a lot of other producers and friends, students of mine who are also producers.
Okay, so Brendan O'Brien, who's produced Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, just a bunch of people, including Bob Dylan at one time. Brendan O'Brien, I interviewed him back in the 90s when I was on Quad in Sacramento, and at that time, production was really starting to be stripped down compared to what the 80s sound. The 80s built it up into, more elaborate production. 90s stripped it down. The 90s modern rock, got more lean. And then now we're at an era where it's overproduction, I think, like too much noise going into the music that's drowning out the lyrics and melody. What do you think?
Sure. Well, sure. Well, the bottom line to me is if you go to a recording studio, you record to learn, because what you want to be able to do is perform whatever you record in the studio. You want to be able to go out and play in front of people and sound at least as good as you sound in your recording.
Right, or better, right?
Or better, yeah. Yeah, basically the recording is really for you to learn how to really deliver a song and sell yourself to an audience.
So what do you like most about music? I know that you have a global base of students that you deal with through Skype.
Yeah, through Skype, WhatsApp, things like that. Yeah, definitely. I like to work with people. I've even sometimes consulted people over the phone. But music to me is about expressing yourself, your personality. The word personality means through sound. Mm-hmm. And so you are an instrument, and that's people have to hear you, and that's what they identify is basically is your personality, your key, and so you learn how to express that through music, or you learn how to mask it and pretend to be something you're not, and just try to sound like somebody else, hoping that you'll siphon off some of their success, maybe.
Hey, speaking of that, now that leads a great segue into this next story about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. Now, how many bands do you think copied Nirvana, like the sound of soft, hard, that type of, songwriting style?
Well, a lot of people, that's what they tend to do to begin with. People that come to me, they want me to teach them how to sound like somebody else.
Yeah.
It's rare that someone comes to me that they really want to discover their own voice. But sometimes people who have already tried to emulate others, they come to the place where they realize there's no pleasure and satisfaction in singing like someone else and not to be yourself. So that I work both ways. Either way, there's all these different ways of learning.
Well, it seemed to me that when Nirvana came on the scene in 91, I mean, they were around in Seattle before 91, but they blasted on the scene nationally that year. That was a whole new sound to a lot of people. But nowadays, lots of bands sound like that, and I'm just curious. Yeah. It doesn't diminish what Nirvana did, but the copycats, it seems like that's taken the easy way out. Yeah, well,
even Kurt Cobain wanted to sound like Freddie Mercury. When Kurt Cobain, before he was famous, he like a lot of other people, admired Queen. They all wanted to sound like Freddie Mercury, be like Freddie Mercury. He was sort of the role model then.
Mm-hmm. He was a big Beatles fan, too.
Yeah. And so there's always that element that people want to emulate those they admire. But I just think when I hear Nirvana, a big part of it was something that came out of the scene at the time, where everybody at the time before Kurt was famous, everybody basically screamed into a microphone. That's what's their basic. I had people come to me saying to me they could never learn how to sing, but they asked me, could I teach them how to scream? And so I said, well, sure, I'll teach you how to scream.
Don't you think, though, that screaming...
why not?
But don't you think screaming can wreck someone's vocal cords?
Well, there's a science of school of music that says it does, and then there's one that says it doesn't, that you can build your voice. My voice... one of my voice trainers told me that Richard Burton, the way he got his voice was he would go up a mountain somewhere where no one could hear him and just started screaming. And when he found a way to scream where it didn't hurt, then that's how he found his famous voice, was just learning how to use your voice like an instrument where you don't damage it, And so maybe it depends on how you practice screaming, because I did teach people how to scream, or they could scream all day, and it had no effect whatsoever on their voice.
Okay. Now, getting back to Kurt Cobain, he was such an influence to a lot of bands. That's why we're talking about him. Kind of like earlier
right.
we talked with David Conley, and we talked about how the Beatles influenced everybody. So it's every now and then you have these revolutions where everyone wants to follow certain artists, like you were talking about. but you actually met Kurt Cobain once. You guys had a beer together, you told me. Before you tell that story, let me tell you my quick alcohol story with Courtney Love. Now, I met Courtney Love a month after Kurt died, and she came to San Francisco to play at the Warfield Theater, and I got to meet her backstage afterward. And she was just crazy during this concert. She jumped into the crowd. She jumped into the mosh pit. You know, it was just crazy. She acted very, very drunk. And afterwards, when I met her, she was very, very drunk. And she even admitted it. She said, "You have to excuse me, but I'm very, very drunk." That's my memory of Courtney. What's your memory of your alcohol story with Kurt Cobain?
Well, he was very quiet, very shy, painfully shy.
First of all, how did you get to meet him?
I met him through a student of mine. He opened for him. This was before he was anybody, so I didn't know he was who he was and what he was about. I just met him as a dude, and so I didn't have any. So he was not unlike a lot of other people I knew at the time who just got into a microphone and started screaming, and that was it. You know, that's how my student and how he was. They would just, in the beginning, they just screamed, and that's how they found their voice. Now, when I think of their music, now in retrospect, I attribute a lot of their sound to Butch Vig, their producer. It wasn't just their music; it was the way Butch Vig recorded them was quite differently than how music had been recorded, where they were trying to record very clean tracks where there would be no bleed over from other tracks.
Right.
Well, someone like Butch intentionally brought noise into the recording.
Right. That's a very important topic, noise. It brings us back to today, how noise is mixed into the music to become part of the music. But the question is, does the noise override the message? The message is the lyrics and the melody, and musically. The noise is part of technology.
Yeah. Well, I think the message is who you are and what comes across in your music about you. You know, people believe they know celebrities. They meet someone, they see someone on TV, they feel they know them. Well, no, they don't know them.
Right.
But they know them through their music, through their art. And so there's a part of them that is expressed through their music. And
they know snapshots of the person.
Yeah. And so sometimes I think it's a part of also the songwriting and the arrangements of the music that has to be congruent with the style that you're the personality that you're trying to put out there.
Do you think, though, music's most powerful when the message just is clear, like all you need is love? It's not buried under any, bells and whistles. It's just there it is in the lyric.
Well, to be honest with you, Alex, I try not to put my preferences before my students. And so whatever it is that interests them, I get interested. But I try to direct them in a way that I think will convey who they are, so at least they're being real with themselves. And that's my main concern, is don't try to be something you're not.
Right, but there's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure these days in the music biz, if you actually want to be in the music biz, to follow some other artist, to be a cookie-cutter copy of whatever's selling.
Yes, and I know that, but I've always encouraged people not to do that. Follow your muse. Follow your heart. Follow what you feel you want to express that feels right to you. And so people listen to music for different things, as you know. Some people listen to the lyrics. The lyrics are the primary thing that they identify with, what the story and what the songs are about. Some people just like music with a good beat, something they feel they can move to and dance to. So music can be experienced or appreciated on many levels.
That's true, but there's only one Beatles out there. And I think the reason they were the biggest thing ever is they had a lot of clear messages in their music that unified the world. They were good, positive messages.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you looked at the Billboard Hot 100? Have you looked at the Billboard Hot 100 lately? You can't even read it. It's like a whole different world, and it's not these awesome messages. It's more like these cookie-cutter song titles that don't really inspire. They're just marketing is what they are. That's. Do you find that people
over-processed? They over-process the recording, so the person's voice isn't even their voice.
Right.
They're being they're processed to the point where people are listening to the recording for the effects, not even for the
actual
performance.
The art. Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Do you get a lot of students that want to sound like this new, overproduced stuff, or do you have more that want to hang on to that classic, authentic sound?
Well, the reality is people don't really know what they want until they find something they feel is worthwhile. And so I try to direct people towards things that they feel are worthwhile, and generally, I would direct them away from that. But sometimes people have that presumption that if they just sang or they could produce something and it sounded like so-and-so, they would be successful.
Yeah, but, there's
the
a lot
point is, even if you were successful, you'd never be happy and you'd never be content, and the journey would mean nothing to you.
Right. Well, a lot of artists, though, I think a lot of artists that make it in the music biz don't end up doing what they wanted to do. They do what the label wanted them to do, and the label uses them for as long as they need them. And then maybe after they leave a big label, then they do what they want, but to smaller audiences because they're not on the radio anymore.
Right. Well, I try to, the people that come to me to tell me they want to be serious about music, I do try to inspire them to want to look at it more like a business, which is that if you look at it like a business, then when you look at a label, you want to have something to negotiate with, your art and your craft, and so you need to have a direction that you want to have, and not be reliant them totally on just what their offer, because they're not really looking at it from your interest. You need to be clear about what your interests are, so then you can make that clear for them.
Right. I know what you're saying, that a lot of people don't know what they want to do in music, but they kind of want to fit into music. I think the ones who actually go far, like a band I helped in Sacramento called Cake, they already knew what they wanted to do. They have a very creative sound. It's very innovative songwriting, yet it embraces a lot of tradition, like even big band sounds mixed with rock and roll, mixed with other, electronic music.
Sure.
So that kind of thing, that's why I got behind them, because they were doing a lot of creative stuff behind music. Now, compare that with the ones that are only trying to follow these bland corporate artists that end up unhappy because they go nowhere and they get lost in the shuffle. So I'm just wondering to what degree you see this going on to where maybe the inspiration should be, learn to be creative, not just be yourself, because if everyone's just being themselves, they might want to copy others. That's what the message is from the music biz, copy others. But what you're saying is different, that you should be yourself.
Well, you can improve yourself, let's put it that way, and then put a better version of yourself in front of people and inspire them in that way. The way you feel inspired, you can also, other people can feel inspired too. And, Warner Brothers once sent a client to me, and the guy had trouble singing, hitting certain notes, and he was really angry because they couldn't understand why a major label would send him to a nobody. From his point of view, he was already signed. Who was I? Why would they send him to nobody? Well, it's because they want to test him. They want to see he's manageable or not, you know. And so if he spits on a 7-Eleven store clerk or, you know, other people, that gives him an indication of how he's going to really treat them once they get behind him. And so they do put out feelers to try to see how manageable you are, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to control you. It just means, can you look at things from some other point of view than just what you want, you know? And so he ended up, you know, like running out of my place. Every time he missed a note, he'd run out into my front yard. And then at one point he started to take things out of his car and throwing them out on the lawn, and just acted insane, you know, maybe, you know, so eventually I heard the song, you know, on the radio, but he wasn't on it.
Really? What was it, a one-hit wonder thing or something that had nothing to do with it?
Yeah, probably was.
Okay.
Yeah, but sometimes I would get audition tapes or word from different people, you know, that they were auditioning and different opportunities. But it just helps to know what you want, and then I think the opportunity will come. You know, sometimes students have asked me, say, well, the music's kind of, this is the trend, and this music I like, that nobody really cares about it. Well, you do, so do it. You know, it really is, to me, it's about personality is really being authentic and being yourself in front of other people, and then people will listen.
Right. Well, I think there's two categories of stars, you know, and it's kind of been true for a long time. There's what you just said, you know, the person who are themselves, like Prince was himself. He built himself to be multi-talented and the boss of all his music. Whereas then there's the other ones, groups that kind of, you know, girl groups of the 80s, like the Cover Girls, who are some of the others, just a bunch of those that all sounded the same. Sweet Sensation, Expose, the best of those, kind of, you know, and Lisa, they all kind of sounded the same because the label wanted a certain sound, and because it's soul. And there's two different kind of camps going on here that work.
Well, it's like a factory, you know. The record labels want to create a factory for recording, and then they want to. But it's because the people that go into the factory don't really know what they want. They're not using it as an opportunity. It's not an opportunity where they're taking opportunity to, you know, it's called artist development, you know.
Well, see, they used to have that.
Really
You're right. Yeah. They used to have artist development. They don't have that much anymore. It used to be you'd have 7 album deals, and you were expected to sell by your 4th album. Now, if you don't sell by your 1st album, they just drop you. That's how much the music biz has lost its, you know, funding, financing. It has really fallen in the past 2 decades. As far as all the money behind it, it makes half. You know, well, not half, more than half that it used to make, but it's not even close to what it used to make in the 90s. So we have a falling, declining industry where people are actually rising. If they're an indie artist, there's more opportunities for them, actually, that didn't exist 20 years ago. So, you know, you have sites like Reverb Nation and SoundCloud that allow you to put your music up there. And I'm just curious what you think about those opportunities, like online opportunities for indie artists.
Well, people need a development coach. I'm a development coach. I'm a voice trainer, but more than that, I'm a development coach.
All right. Well, Nelson Del Pino out of Tacoma, we are going to wrap it up. Anything else you want to talk about that students need to know real quickly?
Interested in lessons with me, they can contact me through my email, which is nelson@vocalmaestro.com.
Great. Thanks a lot, Nelson Del Pino. And thanks for listening to Social Music Talk on WSRadio.com.